I hear you saying often that you're not turned on to politics. Well, let me bring to bear the lessons of history. If you're not turned on to politics, the lesson of history is that politics will turn on you. So, let's start the countdown. Those who are excessively greedy and excessively powerful must give up their privileges. They must give up some of their power. Big business has been colliding with American democracy. American democracy has been losing. We can have a democratic society, or we can have the concentration of great wealth in the hands of the few. We cannot have both. Now imagine what can happen if political campaigns began paying attention to controlling what we own. We'd have our own radio stations, our own television stations, our own cable channel. It is time for a change. The system is not working. Now look at your late evening news, if you can bear it. Look at it. It's 30 minutes, 9 minutes of ads, 3 minutes of street crime right at the beginning, never corporate crime, very superficially covered, 1 minute of impromptu chit-chat between the anchors, 4 minutes of weather, 4 minutes of sports, and that's what happened in your town tonight? And we own the public airways. It's a disgrace. To have our own television stations, radio stations, and cable channels. What we own, the public airway, has been surrendered to the most myopic and avaricious corporations. It is time for a change. The system is not working. This is a message of hope.
Casting your vote shouldn't make you sick.
By the way, by now you know I'm not using a teleprompter.
You're watching the Guerrilla News Network.
This program includes dramatic reenactments of scenes which depict real events and contains material which is intended for
George Bush.
Welcome to the show.
Today, more drugs are coming into America than ever before.
We have the best intelligence in the world. We could stop anything we want to stop.
You still may know little about
the CIA's involvement with drug lords.
Happened in Vietnam. Happened in the Iran-Contra affair.
This was a multi-billion-dollar business.
Even more menacing, the CIA have gone into the drug trade and are trying to take over the government.
It's funny.
In the war
on drugs,
which side is the CIA on?
When you think crack, don't think black. When you think crack, think CIA.
Crack.
The CIA.
Crack. The CIA. Crack. The CIA.
Christopher Simpson is an author and professor at American University, Washington, D.C.
The CIA's operational directorate, in other words, that's their covert operations, paramilitary, dirty tricks, call it whatever you want, has, for at least 40 years that we can document, paid for a significant amount of its work through the sales of heroin and cocaine. It happened in Vietnam. It happened in Afghanistan. It happens in South America. It happened in the Iran-Contra affair.
In 1987, Oliver North was investigated for his role in a covert drugs for arms operation. The Iran-Contra hearings proved that the CIA smuggled cocaine to fund the Nicaraguan Contra army.
The intelligence agencies of this country, by God, should be involved in this battle instead of working with the scum of the earth, which they've been doing.
Former DEA agent Cele Castillo discovered the CIA drug smuggling operation at Ilopango Air Force Base, El Salvador.
When I started seeing all this, I started documenting and writing reports, and then I was forewarned by my supervisor that if I kept it up, I was going to kick out of the country and send back because I was making waves. When I approached the ambassador in El Salvador and I told him, look, the Contras here at Ilopango Airport, your airport, they're flying drugs. They sell it, my hands are tied. It's a covert operation being run by the White House. There's nothing I can do about it. And I was devastated because I was, first of all, trying to justify what they were doing. I said, there's got to be a catch to this. There's something here that's not right.
I mean, we were complicitous as a country in narcotics traffic at the same time as we're spending countless dollars in this country to try to get rid of this problem. It's mind-boggling.
See, we go back, every drug trafficker that was flying for the Contras were all documented in DEA files, and yet they were getting U.S. visas to fly to the U.S. by the Central Intelligence Agency.
Many of the planes from Ilopango were landing at Mena Air Force Base in Arkansas. Arkansas journalist Mara Leverett investigated the drug smuggling operation.
A tremendous volume of cocaine was coming into the state. People wanted to know what was happening in Mena in Arkansas, and so a good deal of information had come to light. Arkansas had been the home base for this major international drug smuggler, and he had been able to operate without being stopped.
In January 1986, Barry Seal was subpoenaed by the Arkansas grand jury investigation of the Mena connection. He became a government informant.
My top load paid me $1.5 million for a single trip.
Because of the CIA connections and the federal involvement in that operation, no investigation of Barry Seal or anyone connected with him was ever going to be allowed to go anywhere, because if any part of that operation were brought to light, it might tumble the whole house of cards.
Before he could testify about his role in the CIA drug operation, Barry Seal was gunned down in cold blood.
Here's, by any definition, the biggest major drug kingpin we've ever run into, and nobody seems to know a thing about it, and nobody wants to raise it.
I don't know if we've got the worst intelligence system in the world. I don't know if we've got the best and they knew it all and just overlooked it. But no matter how you look at it, something's wrong. Something is really wrong out there.
Former cop Mike Rupert was forced out of the LAPD for investigating police ties to CIA drug trafficking.
I am a former LAPD narcotics detective. I worked South Central, and I saw the hands-on working relationship, the interface between local police departments and the CIA. What we saw was a deliberate effort by the agency to make sure that large quantities of the cocaine, the high-quality cocaine, got into the inner cities, like Los Angeles.
After a report in the San Jose Mercury News, CIA Director John Deutsch was forced to confront allegations of drug dealing.
I had confronted CIA Director John Deutsch at Locke High School. He had come to Los Angeles to talk about allegations of CIA deal in drugs.
Deutsch knew exactly what was going on. What he didn't realize was the fact that that many people were going to show up.
Sir, the man in the leather jacket.
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
The room exploded. What I saw at that time was that there was a crying lack of knowledge in the body politic about how much evidence there really was about the criminal activities of the Central Intelligence Agency, specifically dealing drugs.
Director Deutsch, I will refer you to 3 specific agency operations known as Amadeus, Pegasus, and Watchtower. I have Watchtower documents heavily redacted by the agency. I was personally exposed to CIA operations and recruited by CIA personnel who attempted to recruit me in the late 70s to become involved in protecting agency drug operations in this country. I have been trying to get this out for 18 years, and I have the evidence.
If you have information about CIA illegal activity in drugs, you should immediately bring that information to wherever you want, but let me suggest 3 places. The Los Angeles Police Department, It is your choice, the Los Angeles Police Department, the Inspector General, or office of one of your Congress persons from this.
18 years ago, sir, and I got shot at for it.
What was the big deal? He came up here, he sat there, and he lied to the American people.
Let me say something else. If this information turns up wrongdoing, we will bring the people to justice and make them accountable.
He came, he went, and nothing ever happened. First of all, there is no such thing as the war on drugs. There never has been and never will be.
There are currently, right now, in the United States, 60,000 active open cases of police corruption, and that's due to drug money.
Drug money has been integral to CIA covert operations practically from the beginning of this agency.
These are very serious allegations that are being leveled, and they go to the heart of our nation. And if all of the people who have spoken today, telling their own piece of what they have been able to assemble, are wrong, somebody needs to shut us up.
This channel has been liberated by the Guerrilla News Network.
I would say that since World War II, America has come to play more and more of a new kind of role in the world. It's inherited the imperial role that used to be played by the British and the French. The people who plan the foreign policies of America have known for 60 or 70 years that we are living way beyond our means, that if we are an isolated, insular economy in the continental United States, we will not sustain the standard of living we have. A war war conspiracy, I do not mean that there's some kind of master war room where they're working out all the details. I mean that there are things going on that the newspapers don't write about, and the fact that certain aspects of our government are suppressed makes them even more powerful because they're not controlled in the usual way by rational debate. They just happen. You know, we have a kind of myth about our society that our bureaucracies are accountable, and when I wrote The War Conspiracy, I talked about a system of politics in which accountability is consciously diminished. I was making the point about Vietnam that very big, powerful bureaucracies are not accountable at all, most notably the CIA. Parapolitics is something that is controlled, which is manipulated to get us into Vietnam. People know it's there, but they don't talk about it in political science classes. I know because I used to take and teach those classes. The CIA is a big example of this. The CIA has not only been allied with the oil companies in the sense of placing their people with them, but a lot of descendants of oil families. A very common pattern is for sons to go into the CIA. I wouldn't say that those economic issues of fighting over resources and so on are the only explanation to war, but I think it is recurringly the explanation of the biggest wars between the biggest powers. So what do you want to ask me? I think wars arise when people are faced with intolerable conditions. Sometimes it's economic, sometimes it may be ideological, you know. I mean, there are certain forms of Islam, for example, fighting right now where it's a more cultural than an economic matter. But when you are living in a society based on injustice, there's like a time bomb ticking. I mean, someday you'll have to pay the price for that. It's not a stable, permanent sort of thing. And if we don't change our behavior, we're going to see more of that kind of war. This is the Guerrilla News Network.
And it goes like this. And it goes like this. Sometimes I believe that some of these MCs sit down and consciously try to figure out how to get more young black men shot. Like they figured out a correlation between making money and delivering more young black souls into the hands of the cops. I mean, for them, it's all about moving CDs out of one-stops and record shops, even if that means convincing them young brothers to do whatever they have to do in order to get the things that them MCs videos say they got, but y'all, they ain't got it. So how many more need to be caught shoplifting inside the Versace shop before we realize that they are not that successful? And when Gil Scott Heron dropped Message to the Messenger, I really hope that they would listen. But I tell you something, when the smoke clears, them MCs going to be all ears. When the smoke clears, them MCs going to be all ears. When the smoke clears, them MCs going to want to hear why BET don't seem to be able to see as well as Univision. 99% of the time pimping the worst parts of capitalism through record company hoes, platinum-coated egos, putting out bullshit lyrics hyper-marketed to supersede those revolutionary mantras of yesteryear. CCY2, Weibu Si Watu Wazuri Pa Moja Tutashinda Pa Moja Tutashinda. We are black, beautiful people. Together we will win, together we will win. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, MC's been going from record sales to prison cells. From standing outside of strip bars to stripping behind bars. Being stripped of their clothes, jewelry, and cars. Ass out. hole in their jaws. Ass out, hole in their scars. Ass out, hole in their drawers while record execs continue to puff on $50 cigars, looking at pop charts, trying to figure out how they're gonna make the next self-deprecating black star. And because there's so much apathy in the ghetto, they ain't gotta look far. And since talent is no longer necessary, no matter where they look, there they are. Thinking that hip-hop is ever going to return to the high lyrical content of the late 80s is absurd. Cats no longer want to follow the leader. Now they want to follow nigger killers and black woman beaters. And since no one forces us to watch BET, and since no one forces us to buy them garbage ass CDs, and since no one forces us to support them no talent having petty thieves, I guess we simply get what we deserve. Because if we really wanted to elevate ourselves through lyrical content in this new millennium, we would just listen to spoken word.
Mind sciences, or the study of human behavior in relation to the mind, is the newest of all the arts. It's less than 100 years old. And it is by far the one that is most cloaked in secrecy.
The origins of psychological warfare were in Nazi Germany, and in the Nazi ideology they had something that was called Weltanschauungskrieg, which means worldview warfare. The idea for them was imposing the Nazi worldview on the countries that they had occupied. The Americans picked up this idea, created an American version of it, and called that psychological warfare. In trying to understand psychological warfare and in trying to understand the American approach to the post-war efforts to control people's minds, both as individuals and on a mass scale, there's a lot of illusions about how that was done. Were Nazis involved in that process? Yes, they were.
Project Paperclip was a United States government-sanctioned CIA operation for the importation of Nazi and fascist scientists into the United States. Their statement was simply this: if we don't bring these people into this country and contain them, then our enemies, the Soviet Union, will get them. The first wave was to bring these scientists. There was 700 odd propulsion scientists, and then there were some 600 and some odd mind sciences people that they brought in. The CIA was given the responsibility of actually placing the individuals out of Project Paperclip into the military-industrial complex, including our colleges and universities. Mind control was a psychological warfare weapon that Adolf Hitler regarded as the answer for taking over the entire planet. The name for the mind control research in this country was MK-Ultra.
MK-Ultra was one program of a series of programs that came out of the CIA to experiment with different types of mind control, using drugs, using electroshock, using insulin shock, and other techniques.
I think that the goal for those people who planned the program was very straightforward. It was an attempt to figure out a way to interrogate people and to learn how to protect their own agents against control by others. If you put someone in a position of being disabled by not feeding them or not allowing them to sleep or overwhelming them with sound, if you use massive shock treatment and you give people massive doses of drugs such as PCP or mescaline or amphetamines or LSD, and if you put them in periods of darkness where they can't predict from one minute to another what is going to happen next, so they're always dreading, there's no consistency to sort of what's going to happen, anybody can be put in a position of being open to brainwashing. Ewan Cameron was probably the foremost psychiatrist of his time in the 1950s. He was using high-tech sound techniques. He was using multiple kinds of loop recorders to force people to listen to recorded messages 24 hours a day for weeks on end to basically destroy people's thinking patterns.
Injected the lysergic acid into the vein, and he patted me on the shoulder and said, "Now there, lassie, we'll see you later." And I started to feel very frightened, and the fright became a terror. And I sort of began throwing myself from one side of the room to the other. I didn't know what to do to stop this feeling. It felt like my bones were melting, that I just didn't know who I was anymore.
This is not just break-ins of people's homes. It's not just invasions of privacy by illegal wiretapping. This is an invasion of a person's mind. And that is about as profound an injury, except for loss of life, that the government can impose.
This was a post-Nazi program, if you will. It was an Americanization.
I've often made the statement, and I still make it flippantly, the Nazis didn't lose the war, they just had to move.
Now it's 50 years later. Now they're much more clever, much more sophisticated. They have a lot more money to spend.
His motor coordination was disrupted because of the compound's effect. Although his vision was not impaired, he found it difficult to focus his attention on the next objective. His physical actions were noticeably slower. He felt compelled to disobey his instructions.
Did Sergeant Ditches give you any instructions about what you were supposed to do tomorrow? Tomorrow? What is today? Thursday? Today's Thursday. Today's Thursday. Well,
Wars are not won on the battlefield. They're won in the minds of the people.
was in a state of civil war. During that time, 50% of the 4.5 million people of Sierra Leone were forced out of their homes. Thousands of people have been killed. Millions more have experienced atrocities you do not want to even think about.
The people of Sierra Leone insisted that they wanted a democratic government. They no longer wanted the military power. The military resisted.
Well, there are fights for power going on in Africa, and the opposition movements always call themselves revolutionary forces in one way or another.
The IUF is not a revolutionary movement. The IUF seeks political power.
And above all, we'll fight till the last man.
What's the war about? The rebels want to force themselves into power.
Rebel leaders want to buy weapons. In order to buy weapons, they need money. In order to get money, they need diamonds.
Trading diamonds has allowed rebel forces to buy fuel, to buy weapons, to buy friends.
So instead of fighting for democracy, many of these leaders are actually fighting over diamonds.
The rebels are angry at civilians for voting in a civilian government.
Soldiers will catch the people and say, oh, you voted, look at the finger, and if they see that indelible link on the finger, they chop off your finger.
Chop, 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 now you pull up.
And this is how this business of amputation started.
In Sierra Leone, it's quite clear that the tactics of the RUF were to target civilian population in order to spread terror.
It was like we experiencing hell on earth. The rebels started attacking innocent people.
People were hacked to death, houses set on fire, anybody who tried to get out of the house gunned down, people lined up at random and shot.
This is a war about diamonds.
The bulk of them were young boys between the ages of 8 and 16. Some were carrying AK-47, some were carrying Russian assault rifles and rocket-propelled grenade launchers. I heard a loud blast. One rebel fired a rocket-propelled grenade in one of the flats around. I noticed the scattered remains of some 8 people. I saw 2 children whose heads were severed from the rest of their body, and a good number of people with their remains scattered all over. The world was upside down for us in Sierra Leone at that time.
This is a war about diamonds, a war about natural resources.
In chaos, there are people who can take advantage of the lack of government, of the lack of legal controls. There are utterly shameless individuals and organizations out there who will buy conflict diamonds even though they know that those diamonds are helping to sustain a war, even a war as brutal as the one in Sierra Leone.
The De Beers Company have been caught up in a big controversy. They claim not to be buying diamonds and gems from conflict zones like Sierra Leone. They have developed codes of conduct and other ethical standards because they've been criticized severely by NGO groups that have monitored their practices.
At some point in the chain, those diamonds do get down to consumers who, when they buy themselves an engagement ring, want to know that that jewel has not blighted somebody else's life.
I would appeal to you to find out where the diamond you buy is coming from. This is the Gorilla News Network.
And so, without further ado, here it is.
Make a note. Give it to Kathy, who may be the best at this. Since we're going to wish people a happy Rosh Hashanah, which is my idea and a good idea, just don't forget to check when Ramadan is. We have to wish all of our Muslim friends happy Ramadan. Happy Ramadan.
Osama bin Laden.
Happy Ramadan.
Osama bin Laden.
Happy Ramadan.
Osama bin Laden.
Happy Ramadan.
Osama bin.
Happy Ramadan. Happy Ramadan.
Long live
Osama bin Laden.
Long live Osama bin
Laden. We have contributed to making a cult figure out of Osama bin Laden.
See, Osama bin Laden,
his stated goal,
wants to destroy America.
At least he said it to me.
That's what I say to the American people. We've never seen this kind of evil before. They can't stand freedom. The evildoers, they can't stand freedom. Taliban, they can't stand freedom.
The fanatics,
they can't stand freedom. They hate what America stands for.
Freedom and democracy. Freedom and democracy.
These beliefs are the foundation of our civilized world.
And once they gain a foothold, they cannot be stopped.
Either you are with us, or you are with the terrorists.
So I just think that report left the wrong impression.
Welcome back to Terrorism Hits America. What now?
Comes down to this. We're faced with an enemy who are determined to destroy us, and we have no hope of negotiating a peace. Unless that changes, we are justified in doing anything we can to survive.
Now he had the war he wanted. I shall give a propagandist reason he can fight it. The victor is not asked if he told the truth.
This is essentially the same crowd that brought you Desert Storm 10 years ago, particularly Secretary Powell, Vice President Cheney, and of course, President Bush, the son of then President Bush.
I know people in the administration who are dying to use military action.
If you're going to cock it, you throw it. Just shoot something up for a feel-good feeling.
There's an old saying in the Pentagon, ready, fire, aim. An errant piece of ordnance. Getting it a little mixed up.
But we cannot allow any other country to tell us what we can do.
It is action alone that counts.
Above all, though, we're going to have to strengthen our own response.
We have air power, we have naval power.
We want to be free to do what we want to do.
This is something we've got to do to defend the American people.
The course of this conflict is not known.
It will never be over.
It will begin in Afghanistan, but it can't end in Afghanistan.
Americans should not expect one battle.
It's going to be a long, complicated, risky, difficult, long, complicated, messy, sexy, dirty job. Around the world.
With an unspecified outcome.
Long struggle, a long fight.
And the enemy is much more elusive, equally as formidable in the sense of being, I would use the word evil.
Evildoers.
The battle of good against evil
is always being waged.
Our beliefs are the very opposite of those of the fanatics.
This is a war of good versus evil.
Islam and the West
have always been at war, and we know that God is not neutral between them.
So that seems to be a major theme here.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make.
Don't go to hell. Please, I beg you, don't go to hell.
I've taken a lot of heat for saying it goes back to the Crusades.
Barely 100 years after Muhammad's death, the Islamic Empire had spread far and wide. The Pope reacted to the Muslim expansion by launching Christendom's version of Holy Wars, the Crusades.
And you can just see it happening again.
This kind of, quote, clash of civilizations.
And this could be a defining moment
That the world needs to march forward.
to deal with the scourge of
The bearded ones.
and see what they have done against mankind.
Because it's only going to happen with all of us together.
The message to Muslim nations and moderate Arabs, Pakistan also, is
We hold our beliefs every bit as strongly as they hold theirs. And now is the time to show it.
When we come back, sometimes the best offense is a strong defense.
And a lot depends on strong American leadership.
Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil.
George Bush looks as if he may go into this as a boy and come out a man.
I think he has a tremendous asset in this crisis, and that is his simplicity. The American people,
He feels more and more like the commander-in-chief.
he was Jimmy Stewart tonight.
Thank you.
He is also bringing to bear the assets and instruments of national power of a vast number of countries around the world.
The president has the power to take action, even force.
To hunt down, to find, to smoke out of their holes. They hide in caves. We'll get them out.
Stop it.
We must not allow terrorists to rule our country.
And now, Musketeers, here's something we want you always to remember.
Almost all religions preach that love is the supreme virtue, and a few spiritual teachers, perceiving that we are all gifted at loving what pleases us, teach that the highest, the most edifying forms, which might ultimately save the world, involve our regard for those it is difficult to love, some of whom are our enemies.
Kennedy made a speech at American University in June of the year before he died, and he said, we live in one world, we got to breathe in the same air, and we got to live together, we're going to die together.
What happened?
There's a great deal of distrust of the United States around the world.
They see a continuum of the Crusades in every action as the West gains more power.
Their fear is that the United States is like a Goliath that can stride around the earth, breaking things.
They don't all trust our motives.
We're also making life difficult around the world in a number of other countries. So,
as a consequence, recently we have not been doing very much real education, which is why there's so much cynicism, pessimism, apathy.
When Thomas Aquinas appeared on the Meeting of Minds shows, one of the many fascinating things he said was that he had learned a great deal from his enemies, by which he meant his philosophical opponents. We don't seem to be able to learn anything from philosophical opponents.
And the danger is that many of us may start to equate Islam with the terrorists.
The anger, hatred, and rage we are feeling in our hearts as Americans.
Military might cannot reclaim what we have lost inside ourselves.
Hopefully we will come away with as few lives lost as we can. We have already lost way too many.
For 200-odd years, this nation has counted on the military to defend itself against these sorts of threats. Well, now the threats are here, they're home.
What happened? I thought we lived in a safe playground of a world where my career was the only thing I had to think about. And suddenly there's a larger, desperate, dangerous world. Explain it to me. What's it about? This isn't the world you promised me. This isn't the world you told me about. This isn't the world in which only private things count.
And so it really comes down to a very basic choice that we have to make as a civilization. Either we will learn to bury the animosities of our ethnocentric, militant traditions and come to understand that Earth's survival depends on our collective, unified participation, or we will sustain this cycle of violence and revenge until humanity is returned to the status of primitivity and Earth reduced to the rubble of antiquity. It's really up to us. It really is up to us.
Good night.
Public relations is a real sort of benign-sounding term to describe propaganda. Propaganda is conducted as a multi-billion-dollar business. No one's ever heard of these major PR firms like Burson Marsteller, Edelman, Hill & Knowlton. These are giant companies owned by even bigger advertising firms no one's ever heard of. But these advertising and PR firms, of course, touch our lives every day through all these sophisticated messages. They like to stay behind the scenes, and they don't want the light shown on them. What we do at PR Watch is we try to shine the light on them and explain how they work in manipulating news, information, and public opinion. On the opposite side of every single issue are these multi-million-dollar PR campaigns, propaganda campaigns that involve intelligence gathering, message development, use of third-party independent experts as spokespeople, media manipulation, perception management.
Just close your eyes and take long, deep breaths.
Public relations works by putting its message in the mouths of people we trust. It might be Tom Brokaw, it might be some expert that Dan Rather has on the evening news. And the dirty little secret is that on any given day, 40, 50, 60% or more of what we see, hear, and read as news is in fact public relations. The big corporate media gladly cooperates with its advertisers, the milk industry, the food industry, the biotech industry. Why? Because billions and billions and billions of dollars that flow from corporations into the media as advertising is what makes the media so profitable. Candidates, toothpaste, genetically engineered food are all sold to us in the same way through advertising and PR campaigns. So the best propaganda is invisible, the best public relations is invisible. And as Alex Carey pointed out in his book, Taking the Risk Out of Democracy, public relations is how propaganda is waged in countries like the United States.
Long, deep breaths.
Guerrilla warfare is, to me, how would I define it? I would define it as taking away all the rules of proper conduct, because the goal of a war is to win, and therefore anything that wins the war you must do. It's usually done by people who have little money and little power and little influence in society. I think the best explanation of it would be Malcolm X's phrase, "by any means necessary." I really look at it as kind of like a campaign of war, and that information is basically the ultimate weapon. There's this great paradox. At the same time that there's more and more decentralized information via the internet, there's more and more centralized control of information thanks to the Telecommunications Deregulation Act. Who are the people who control internet information? CNN.com, Time.com, ABCnews.com, things like that, which are serving, an oligopoly of economic and media interests. In order to have power, you have to cynically use it and sometimes do things which are immoral to get your agenda through. Anyone can find, if they want to, on the internet, an incredible amount of information, alternative and underground information. They don't mind if people look at macro phenomenons so much, especially underground people. Like, if I write the CIA is involved in drugs, they don't care. If I say that the Pentagon is crooked and is supporting death squads in Central America, they don't care. But when you come up with actual names of specific people, and you come up with hard evidence that links them to crimes, that's when you get knocked off, or that's when they really start giving you warnings.
I'm beginning to feel.
The best way to suppress information isn't to attack people who present it, but instead to have so many indulgent pleasures out there that important information will be drowned out by the noise of the spectacle. I think people need to be shocked. I mean, this is one of the funny things of having a culture which is so much shock-based in the sense of Jerry Springer or Howard Stern, where in essence people get a kind of a fix like they're doing something dangerous and then go back to drinking beer and watching TV. I think it's more important to give people a shock where they can't just go back to that, where they have to deal with it, where they have to come face to face with the fact that the structure that we pledge allegiance to and that we believe in and that we love is at its core quite diabolical. In the end, they can only do what they can get away with. But if you can infect people's minds with insidious values like freedom and liberty and the right to be whatever you want to be, you will be victorious. This is Robert Sterling, and you're watching the Guerrilla News Network.